A Bloomberg report says China has ordered its airlines to stop taking deliveries of new Boeing planes. It's the latest retaliation from the country in the ongoing trade war. Bloomberg reports China has also asked airlines to halt purchases of aircraft equipment and parts from U.S. companies. President Trump has hiked tariffs on Chinese imports to 145%, and Beijing responded by raising tariffs on U.S. goods to 125%. At this hour, we are still waiting to hear back from Boeing for their response to this report. We do know Boeing has delivered 18 planes to China this year. And here's a look at how that news impacted Boeing stock today. At the closing bell today, it was down more than 3 points. And here to break down why this move is so significant for the plane maker is aviation expert Scott Hamilton. Scott, thanks for being here.
Good evening.
Scott, how significant is the Chinese market to Boeing's overall sales?
Well, going back to the last time that it was normal, which is March 9th, 2019, before various crises began for Boeing, China generally accounted for 25 to 30% of Boeing's annual deliveries.
That's a pretty big chunk. So what kind of financial impact could this have short-term and long-term for Boeing?
Short term, and of course, this depends on how long you define short term, but the scheduled deliveries for 2025 amount to something north of $1.5 billion by list prices.
And you heard me mention that China telling its its plane makers not to order U.S. parts as well. Can Chinese airlines maintain and operate their current Boeing planes without any U.S. support?
Only for a limited amount of time. And I think the most recent example is when, after Russia invaded Ukraine, sanctions were put on by the U.S. and by the European Union that basically blocked any spare parts to the Russian airlines, and they began to ground airplanes after what's called time-limited and cycle-limited thresholds were hit.
So this could be, or it seems to me, could be a lose-lose in certain ways, but can you tell us what this could possibly mean for any of Boeing's competitors, namely Airbus?
There is very little Airbus can do because, first off, it's sold out until the 2030 decade. But here's the real nuance of all of this. Tariffs are put on foreign content. Well, Airbus has foreign content in every one of its airplanes, and most of that foreign content comes from the United States. Furthermore, the Chinese-made airplanes from Comac also have U.S. parts in there. So I don't quite understand the rationale that China is doing in terms of blocking parts, because that will grind their own production to a halt, that will grind their airlines to a halt.
Have you ever seen anything like this before? Have geopolitical tensions ever affected the aviation industry in this way ever before?
Well, back in the first Trump administration, the World Trade Organization authorized the U.S. and the European Union to levy tariffs over a long-running, 2-decade-old trade complaint between the EU and the U.S. over illegal subsidies between Airbus and Boeing. Now, at that time, Trump imposed a 10 to 15% tariff on imported parts, but by and large, aerospace has been exempted from this type of trade war.
Yeah, and you said you can't really understand the logic behind it. So any guesses as to what could potentially happen next? Or is the aviation industry, big enough to perhaps bring the two parties to the table?
Well, certainly the U.S. aviation industry approached Donald Trump before the tariffs were even imposed, and we saw that had no effect whatsoever. Now, this is just me talking. I think that over the coming months, some sort of an agreement will be reached where Donald Trump can claim victory. He's blinked on some of these tariffs already. But this just cannot stand to go on for a long period of time.
Scott Hamilton, thank you so much for being with us live and for some of your insight. We will all keep watching some pretty big news affecting Boeing today. Thank you.